It's the one to watch.
Is it true you've taken him back? I can't help how I feel about him. I know that, Tone, but look, he's the only man I've ever loved.
EastEnders on BBC One tonight at 7:30.
Can we sort out where we stand?
Tom, I know that you still love her.
I've missed you loads. You look fantastic. Rimmer back on the scene. Tom doesn't stand a chance. Davina! Come with me.
That's not what you want.
And you know what I want.
Waterloo Road, tonight at 8 on BBC One.
One of London's biggest stories is the 2012 Olympics. Who can
forget those amazing scenes in Trafalgar Square when we heard the news that London
had beaten Paris in the race for the Olympic Games? The whole city seemed excited.
And however you feel about it, when the Games come in 2012, one thing's for certain.
Londoners are going to have some of the best seats in the house. BBC London, your news is our news.
And now BBC One, time for the news with George Alagaya and Asad Ahmed.
At 6 o'clock from next year, it will be compulsory for thousands of workers to have ID cards. The government wants information about all of us on the cards, but who else will have access to it? Also on tonight's programme, a cold-blooded killer, a man's jailed for murdering 3 members of the same family. Warned the drugs giant that knew its antidepressants were risky for the young, but said too little, too late.
As soon as I was put on Suboxone, I started cutting myself every day.
What's the point of a class photo with no faces? The school criticised for being too PC. And life in the cooler, how a revolutionary treatment could see this champion jockey back in the saddle weeks after a terrible fall.
On BBC London, accusations of double standards with 3,000 vehicles for Olympic bigwigs at a supposedly car-free games. And the father of a soldier killed in Afghanistan says the MOD failed his son.
Good evening and welcome to the 6 o'clock news. ID cards could be with us much sooner than we think. Thousands of workers in sensitive jobs at airports and power stations will have to have them next year. But they're the only British citizens for whom it will be compulsory. The rest of us will be able to get one, if we want it, from 2010, starting with students. That's not convinced critics who've accused the government of introducing ID cards by the back door. Sophie Hutchinson has been looking at the proposals.
Exactly who we are seems to be increasingly important. Our true identities can protect us from being wrongly linked to crime. And because of that, the government says it's determined to roll out identity cards.
It enables me to prove who I am more easily, more quickly. And secondly, it enables me to be confident that other people are who they say they are.
So who will need one? Well, in November this year, foreign nationals from outside Europe on student or marriage visas will get compulsory ID cards. Next year, the scheme will be extended to airport staff and other British citizens working in high-risk security roles or areas. From 2010, young people will also be able to apply voluntarily, and then any age group later that year. So what will be on it? Well, biometric information taken from a fingerprint will be stored on a computer, and that'll be linked to a card that'll look rather like your driving licence. On it will be your name, date of birth and nationality. But how safe will it be? Recent losses of confidential information by government departments have raised concerns about the security of new databases, which will be accessible to police, MI5, tax authorities and some private companies who have consent.
The usual vulnerability is in the people operating the systems, and the problem is that it's very difficult to build systems that are secure, functional and on a large scale. Generally you can only get 2 of these, you can't get all 3.
And civil liberties groups are warning the cards will be disastrous for privacy. But the government insists everyone accessing our personal information will be checked. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
Well, let's talk about this to our political editor, Nick Robinson. Nick, aren't people going to be saying that this is actually compulsion, but by the back door?
That is precisely, of course, what the critics of ID cards are saying. And it's certainly true, George, that as ministers watch the polls turn against ID cards, that what they've done today is maximise the gains and talk down the pain. So the compulsory cards today are for people that ministers insist might be a terrorist threat or might be illegal immigrants. They're saying to students and young people, wouldn't it be helpful to have one of these cards, not just as you queue up to prove your age at the bar, but as you apply for a student loan. And they're saying to the rest of us, look, if you apply for a passport, yes, you'll have to give your thumbprints, but if you don't want another card as well, that won't matter. Now, what the critics say is forget the card. What matters is the database after that huge loss of data recently, and the fact that that thumb or fingerprint will appear on it. Now, to go to compulsion for all of us, that won't happen for around about a decade's time. That means not the next election, almost certainly the election after that. And with both the Tories and the Liberal Democrats opposing Labour's plans, compulsion may not happen.
All right, Nick, thank you. Kesha Wizard was a bright young teenager, and she even made it to ITV's Stars in Their Eyes programme. But last July she was murdered in a brutal attack along with her mother and 13-year-old brother. Today, Pierre Williams was sentenced to 38 years in prison. The judge spoke of the terror and pain he must have inflicted. Nick Ravenscroft reports.
Kesha Wizard's talent shone brightly, not just in this TV show. She was also a gifted student who'd won a scholarship to study law and wanted to become a barrister. But that talent and the lives of Kesha, her mum Beverly and her younger brother Fred were ended in the most brutal and sadistic way. Last summer their bodies were found at their home in South Manchester. They'd been put face down upstairs with their hands tied behind their backs and then bludgeoned over the head with a heavy hammer. They were, say the prosecution, execution-style killings. And this is the man who killed them, an ex-boyfriend of Kesha's mum Beverly, 33-year-old Pierre Williams. He seriously sexually assaulted the two women before the murder. He had a history of sexual violence.
He's your typical cold-blooded killer. He will not take no for an answer. He does not accept rejection. His frustration boils over inside of him. But let me make this clear. This is no frenzied lack of control attack. This was an absolutely cold, calculating attack.
Williams was the prime suspect from the start, and within hours of a nationwide manhunt beginning, he called police to hand himself in.
Police emergency.
Yeah, I've been on the news today saying I'm a suspect for the murder inquiry.
What's your name?
Pierre Williams.
How old are you?
32.
And do you handing yourself in?
Yeah, I just want the police to come and see me now so I can sort it all out.
And today he was given 3 life sentences for the murders.
It is inconceivable that any punishment would ever fit this heinous crime. And the only comfort any of the family can take from this court case is that Williams will hopefully never ever be able to cause this much heartache to another family.
Kesha, seen here performing in a school play, and her family were the victims of a cruel and twisted man who'd once been trusted as a friend. But he became someone they feared, and tragically they were right to. Nick Ravenscroft, BBC News, Manchester.
The drugs giant GlaxoSmithKline has escaped prosecution over its delay in alerting young people about the risks of taking its antidepressant Seroxat. The health watchdog said the company failed in its ethical responsibility to publicise the increased risk of self-harm and suicidal behaviour among teenagers. Shelley Joffrey reports.
It was the BBC's Panorama that first lifted the lid on problems with Seroxat more than 5 years ago. One of the new generation of antidepressants, it was supposed to reduce the risk of suicide in depressed patients. But for some, like Laura Davey, who took it as a teenager, it had the opposite effect.
I was just down, a bit tearful. But as soon as I was put on Seroxat, I started cutting myself every day and actually sit in my bedroom with either a compass or a knife and just slit my wrists until they bled.
In May 2003, GlaxoSmithKline gave the medicines regulator its own clinical trial data that showed Seroxat was not effective for depressed children and, crucially, that it trebled their risk of suicidal behaviour. The regulator immediately warned against prescribing to under-18s and launched a criminal investigation. After 4 years, today the MHRA concluded that GSK could and should have reported this information earlier than it did, but that the law at the time was not sufficiently strong to require them to.
The ethical responsibility of a company, over and above its legal responsibilities, should require the notification of any safety information over and above what the law specifically demands.
In a statement, though, GSK said, "We firmly believe we acted properly and responsibly." Today's announcement highlights a loophole in the law. Most medicines haven't been tested or licensed for children, but doctors are allowed to prescribe them if they think they may be helpful. At one point, around 7,000 children a year were taking Seroxat, yet GSK was under no legal obligation to tell the regulator about its negative trial data.
People who make guidelines for NICE, which I have a part in, we all depend on the published evidence. And the current view is that we can't depend on it because we know that so much of it goes unpublished.
The Health Secretary announced today a tightening of the law to make sure that in future drug companies pass on straight away any information that has a bearing on the protection of the public. Shelley Joffrey, BBC News.
Princess Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell, has refused to give more evidence to the inquest into her death. He was asked to attend the hearing by the coroner to explain inconsistencies between the evidence he'd given and comments attributed to him in the Sun newspaper. The coroner has no power to force him to return. The Bank of England has decided to keep interest rates at 5.25%. Last month, the bank reduced rates by 0.25% amid signs of an economic slowdown. Tens of thousands of pupils in Britain's biggest cities are missing out on the secondary school of their choice. A BBC survey has revealed a big difference in satisfaction depending on where you live. In London and Birmingham, for example, about 1 in 3 children do not get their first choice. But in Leicestershire, almost everyone does get into the school of their choice. James Westhead has been looking at the numbers.
Like around 1 in every 5 families who received an offer of a secondary school place this week, Kate Strachan and her daughter Matilda didn't get their first choice. While they're coming to terms with the school she's been offered, many others will be disappointed.
The disappointment particularly is for Matilda, who, as a child, what you expect to happen is often, a very sort of perfect scenario. I think as a parent, I know that either of the schools will offer her a good education.
But today's BBC survey of 140 out of 150 local authorities found a big divide on school choice. In London, only 2/3, 65%, got their first preference, compared to 87% in the rest of England. In Leicestershire, Redcar and Cleveland, 98% of 11-year-olds will start at their first choice school in September. By contrast, there's been such anxiety in Brighton over a new lottery system for state schools that fee-paying schools like this one have reported a sharp rise in parents going private. Despite this school's experience, there's no evidence yet of a surge in parents switching to private education. But if more are missing out on their first choice state school, there will be a boom in appeals. Challenging school places is now big business, with parents increasingly hiring specialist consultants.
I've personally experienced an increase in admissions appeals, particularly over the last 3 years. Between March and May, I tend to be extremely busy, and I think parents are also being more advised more and more by local authorities to actually seek legal representation.
So as most 10-year-olds now look forward to their new secondary school, a disappointed minority face a legal battle over their future. James Westhead, BBC News.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is worse now than at any time in the past 40 years, according to a group of leading aid agencies. 1.5 million people are squeezed into this tiny strip of land. It's the 6th most densely populated area in the world, and today's report paints a bleak picture of life there. 80% of families, that's more than 1 million people, rely on food aid. Unemployment runs at 40%, and 1 in 3 people don't have running water in their homes. The group blames Israel's blockade of Gaza for the crisis. Israel says the blockade's vital in preventing rocket attacks from the area. From Gaza, Alim Makboul reports.
In Gaza, people are finding it more and more difficult to make ends meet. Palestinians like Abu Muhammad and his 10 children are becoming increasingly dependent on UN aid and finding it tough to see where the hope is.
Life is very difficult now. I have no job, there's no food, no nothing. Sometimes I feel I just want to die because I can't provide for my family.
This is the kidney ward in Gaza City's main hospital. Border closures mean many of these people can't get the drugs they need. Most aren't allowed to leave Gaza to get treatment elsewhere. But all aspects of life in Gaza have been affected.
The people here have been stripped of their dignity, and that's why hope has given way to despair. We need to acknowledge the reality, and the reality is desperate, and it's feeding extremism.
But Israel's worried about rockets being fired from Gaza at its towns. Along with tough military action, it says the sanctions are essential to put pressure on the militants.
Israel has decided that we won't put up with it anymore. We will not continue to have Hamas flourish while it throws rockets at us.
The economy in Gaza has been devastated. Poverty here has increased dramatically and the society is crumbling. But what charities say is that this continues to be an entirely man-made crisis. But what they also say is that the problems can be reversed if there's a will. Aleem Makboul, BBC News, Gaza City.
And the time is 15 minutes past 6. Our top story tonight. From next year, it will be compulsory for thousands of workers to have ID cards. And coming up, life in the freezer, the revolutionary treatment for a champion jockey.
Later on BBC London News, Eyesore or Iconic, the architects behind a campaign to save a 70s tower block. And just the tonic, the pharmacist celebrating the arrival of a Banksy work of art on his wall. Join us in 15 minutes.
Now, was this taking child protection too far? A primary school in Essex decided to cover its pupils' heads with smiley faces on its website. The school says it was for safety reasons, but as Louisa Baldini reports, some have said the move was over the top.
Smile please, you're on camera. Except the children who posed for these photos have had their faces covered up on their school website. And they're not obscured the conventional way, but with the smiley face symbol popularised by 1980s acid music. The decision not to identify the pupils on the school newsletter page was taken at Cann Hall Primary in Clacton in Essex. The headmistress here, Claire Rees, doesn't want to appear on camera. In an official statement, she says, due to the public arena of the internet, it's an area that we feel strongly about. In order to protect our children, we made the decision not to include any faces. The parents I spoke to do support the school.
The people that should know who the children are in the teams and whatever do know the children.
I think she's doing the right thing, what she feels to be the right way.
But is the school being reasonably cautious or alarmist?
Well, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the point of publishing a photograph that you can only see smiley faces seems to me to be absolutely pointless. There is no reason for publishing that photograph at all.
So what are the chances of photos from the internet getting into the wrong hands? Figures from the Ministry of Justice show that 166 people were found guilty of possession of an indecent photo of a child in 2006. And a study for the NSPCC shows that 5% of children under 16 experience sexual abuse during childhood by an adult stranger or someone they just met. There is no legal requirement for schools to obscure photos of children. However, Cann Hall Primary says it will continue to blur faces on its website, though it has removed the smiley face photos that have caused such a stir. Louisa Baldini, BBC News, Clacton-on-Sea.
The mother of a 5-year-old boy who died during an E. coli outbreak in South Wales has said the butcher who supplied the contaminated meat put greed before the health and safety of children. Sharon Mills also told a public inquiry that her son was sent home by an out-of-hours GP only hours before being admitted to hospital. Wirra Davis is at the inquiry in Cardiff. Wirra,
George, this is one of the biggest E. coli outbreaks ever seen in the UK, affecting more than 100 people in dozens of schools across South Wales. Today at this inquiry, we heard a heartbroken mother describe how a series of failings contributed to her son's death. 2.5 years after the death of her son, Sharon Mills arrived at this inquiry and described emotionally and eloquently how her world was turned upside down. 5-year-old Mason Jones, a lively and confident boy, died a slow and painful death after he ate meat contaminated with the E. coli bug. Although he was the only child to die, more than 150 people in 44 South Wales schools were affected. The meat came from this Bridgend Butchers, which supplied food to schools across the region. Conditions inside, where the same equipment was used to process raw and cooked meat, were described as filthy. After pleading guilty to supplying unsafe food, William Tudor was sentenced to 12 months in jail.
I think William Tudor, all he thought about was profit. And it seemed to me that he didn't really care in what state his meat was coming out of that place. And he didn't care who was consuming it, least of all our children.
The inquiry has already heard about a series of failings that allowed contaminated food to be supplied to schools across South Wales.
Everyone has let me down. Local authorities, because we put our trust in them. I've looked after my children all I can and protected them, yet we weren't protected.
This inquiry is chaired by the eminent biologist Professor Hugh Pennington. Mason Jones's family say they're confident it will highlight the many failures that led to his death. Now, it wasn't just the butcher that Mason's mother had harsh words for. She also described how an E. coli telephone helpline simply wasn't working, and how her young son was sent home from an out-of-hours doctor's with basic medicines just hours before he had to be admitted to hospital in a critical condition from which he never recovered. Plenty of evidence and food for thought for this inquiry to mull over. Back to you, George.
Wira, thank you. This week sees the start of a series of programmes on the BBC about the views of Britain's white working class. A poll for tonight's Newsnight found that more than half think that nobody speaks out for them. Mark Simpson reports from what's being called the whitest town in the country, Easington in County Durham.
Melanie, 2 bacon sandwiches. Here, I'll give you the buns.
At the village calf, life hasn't changed much in recent years. The bread is white and it's popular. But the man in charge feels that the white working class people of Britain have lost their status in society.
I think the government want to look at looking after their own before they look after everybody else. I'm not against anybody of any ethnic group from any part of the world coming here, but I think the government should start looking after their own and ask themselves, is this England or is it not England?
Not all of his customers agree, but this one does.
I think we have been let down. We've been let down by the government, not necessarily this government, by previous governments.
So just how widespread is that type of feeling? An opinion poll by the BBC's Newsnight programme attempted to find out.
The survey tried to capture the mood of the white working class. Only 2 out of every 10 people questioned said they felt Britain had actually got better in the past decade. And a majority, 6 out of 10, felt nobody was speaking up for them, and the voice of white working class Britain simply wasn't being heard.
Easington is a former mining village. The lollipop man used to work down the pit, and so did most people at the local working men's club. If working class morale is low, what can the government do to raise it?
The people that's coming into the country, immigrants, they have more rights than what we have.
I would love them to look after us, to really look after us.
One thing everyone agrees on is that this is a delicate subject and everyone needs to tread carefully.
Mark Simpson reporting there, and you can see more on that story on Newsnight tonight at BBC 2 at 10:30. Times Square, New York was shut for 3 hours earlier this morning after an explosion. Police said a small bomb was thrown at a military recruitment centre. No one was hurt. The American authorities have said the blast did not appear to be terrorist-related. The film star Patrick Swayze, best known for his role in Dirty Dancing and Ghost, has pancreatic cancer. The 55-year-old is currently being treated and his doctor says he is responding well. Now, just 7 weeks ago, the jump jockey Tony McCoy had an horrific fall which threatened his career. But incredibly, the 12 times champion should soon find out that he's fit to ride at the Cheltenham Festival. But how was it done? You'll see from Kevin Geary's report why he's being called the Iceman.
Still with a lead here to D'Argent and Arnold Lane. Oh, and Arnold Lane is a faller. Arnold Lane has gone. Horse is okay.
But the jockey wasn't. This was the moment when many feared that the illustrious career of 12 times champion jump jockey Tony McCoy might end. He'd fractured a vertebra in his back that needed an operation to pin it together again. But now, just 7 weeks later, the Iceman returneth. McCoy has been undergoing super-freezing cryotherapy treatment to speed up the healing process on his injury and the scar tissue. He's been submitting himself to scarcely imaginable cold in a bid to get fit in time for next week's Cheltenham Festival. So, has it worked?
It's definitely helped speed up my recovery, I'd say. I think I've been able to do a stiffer exercise programme, if you like, because of it. And as I said about my blood circulation, when you come out of it at that cold temperature, your body is bright red. And for that reason alone, the blood in your body must be circulating so much faster than it normally does. And that's what they say stimulates the healing.
It's more than a bit parky in there. In fact, it's roughly 3 times colder than anywhere else on Earth. And a human being can only survive in there for about 6 or 7 minutes. That just shows you how determined Tony McCoy is to be fit for Cheltenham. Even for those like McCoy who are relatively used to it, the cold bites. It's important to keep moving. Even brass monkeys would lose their appendages and synthetic garments would disintegrate. But how does it work?
You've got 250,000 temperature receptors in your skin, and they send a message to the brain saying there's something going on here. The brain then sends messages to your hormone system, to your blood circulation, and basically ups your body's game.
Remarkably, McCoy is already back in the saddle on the training gallops and is now awaiting the medical go-ahead to ride at Jump Racing's great festival.
I want to be champion jockey every year, and if you want to be champion jockey, then you have to get back as quick as possible and not miss too many days. So I would be trying to get back all the time quickly.
And another winner for McCoy. He's also set a new record low temperature in the chamber. Clearly a man who hates losing at anything. Kevin Geary, BBC News.
Not quite that cold outside. Let's get the details now with Nick Miller. Hello.
That would be something, George. What we have got coming up overnight is a bit of rain, a spell of rain for us all, accompanied by some gusty winds, but for the most part it will be out of the way by the time we're up and about in the morning. Now it's western Scotland and Northern Ireland that will get the rain first this evening. It feeds further south and east as the night goes on. On its back edge there's some colder air feeding in, so before it clears away it may just produce something wintry to the hills across the northern half of the United Kingdom. And with clearer, colder weather following on behind the rain, do watch out for some icy patches on untreated roads from, say, North Wales northwards. Now, that rain not quite into the far southeast until the very end of the night, which means it's still here first thing tomorrow morning, but it will clear away. For most, it's a bright start with some sunshine, although there will be some showers developing in the west, spreading further east. So 1 or 2 of those into the southwest during the afternoon, and a scattering of them across Wales, but by no means everybody will get a shower. There'll be some sunshine in between, but temperatures in single figures, so down on today. So despite any sunshine, a fresher feel to the weather and still a brisk wind, especially across Northern Ireland and for Scotland, blowing in a fair few showers in Scotland, especially to the west. They'll be wintry over higher ground, and don't be surprised that even at lower levels you get some sleet or perhaps some hail. A few showers to northwest England, drier and brighter to the east of the Pennines, and a few of those showers will feed into the Midlands after a fine start, maybe 1 or 2 into East Anglia and the southeast by evening. How about the start of the weekend? Not looking good, dull and damp for England and Wales. A band of heavier rain feeding its way south. Bright and showery Scotland and Northern Ireland. Strong to gale force winds. As for Sunday, it's colder, but it's brighter. But there will be showers in the north and west, wintry over higher ground. And then look at the southwest, rain gathering late in the day. A precursor to some potentially quite stormy weather on Sunday night into Monday. Not set in stone yet. We'll keep you updated. Keep watching.
All right, Nick, we will. Thanks very much. A reminder of tonight's main news. From next year, it will be compulsory for thousands of workers to have ID cards. A man's been jailed for murdering 3 members of the same family. Coming up on News 24, all the day's entertainment news, including the latest on the health of actor Patrick Swayze. It's nearly 6:30. Stay with us. Now it's time to join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.
Tonight on BBC London News, will our Olympics really be the greenest ever? Environmental campaigners call on the IOC to ditch their demands for thousands of official cars. The father of a soldier killed in Afghanistan criticises the MOD for failing to properly protect his son.
It's an insult to the integrity of the British Army, the regiment James was part of, and in particular the patrol commander.
Also tonight, Baby on Board, the campaign attempting to get commuters to be more considerate to pregnant women. Plus the London pharmacy, who's seen a fortune on the wall. A very good evening and a warm welcome to the programme. The greenest games ever is how the London 2012 Olympics is being sold, with spectators and athletes banned from using cars. So it's come as a shock to some to learn that Olympic officials want 3,000 cars laid on to ferry themselves around the capital, with special fast-track lanes to help them dodge the traffic. Well, not surprisingly, not everyone's happy, and the IOC are being asked to rethink their demands. Our political editor, Tim Donovan, is in central London for us this evening. Tim.
Assad, it's one of the biggest selling points of the London Games. Its focus on the environment and delivering an incomparable public transport network. A very modern approach, a very forward-thinking approach to the Olympic movement, but it's clear that old habits die hard and some things may never change. It was a memorable stunt, IOC officials driven along the Channel Tunnel rail route. It's claimed that London 2012 will be the greenest games. And what's more,
this will be a public transport games.
For the masses anyway, while hundreds of thousands of spectators will have to use train, tube and bus, a select group will not. Official cars will be provided for as many as 3,000 VIPs. Whizzing politicians, corporate sponsors, members of the International Olympic Committee along dedicated traffic-free routes. The Greens at City Hall are now leading the chorus of disapproval.
I think it's outrageous. We as Londoners and all the visitors to the Games are being asked to leave our cars behind to use what is going to be a very good public transport system, and I really think that virtually all of these officials could do exactly the same.
The International Olympic Committee insists a fleet of official cars is essential, even though there will be official coaches shuttling between hotels and the Olympic venues. The Mayor says he would consider charging the vehicles the new £25 congestion charge, but he looks powerless to do much more.
There isn't really a case for IOC officials or IOC members to be in chauffeur-driven cars, and we will. I mean, once the Games in Beijing are over and we officially become the host city, it's one of the issues I'll try and persuade the IOC to accept. The world's moved on and they need to as well.
It's the Olympic dignitaries who enjoy the best seats. Now it's clear they'll enjoy the most comfortable journeys too. And the IOC sees no conflict with the environmental claims being made for London's Games. In a statement they said to us, some journeys are not necessarily easy to do and can be difficult to plan because Olympic representatives need to move from venue to venue quickly and at short notice for a variety of reasons. But the Greens say they'll be writing to every IOC member asking them to give up this perk. Now, the London Games organisers say they won't need 3,000 cars. That was an estimate based on previous games where the public transport wasn't as good, but they do say there will need to be some for security and logistical purposes. There'll be low-emission vehicles paid for out of the private sponsorship budget. They say that a lot of officials will take buses, some will share cars, and others won't use these official cars at all.
OK, Tim, thanks very much for that. Now, there's lots more to come this evening, including...
The people who live here don't like it. The council wants to demolish it. So why are architects trying to save this run-down block of flats?
The death of a Hertfordshire soldier who was killed whilst trying to help an injured colleague in Afghanistan has been described as unforgivable and inexcusable. A coroner went on to say that Captain James Phillipson from St Albans was poorly equipped for duty. The Ministry of Defence has said Captain Phillipson's colleagues were partly to blame. As Yvonne Hall reports, his family and MP now want an apology.
See what's going on. We've got our guys up in Kajaki getting, they got mortared last night.
Captain James Phillipson on duty in Afghanistan.
This is actually my son James.
James was Tony's eldest son. Just days after these pictures were taken, the 29-year-old was dead, shot by Taliban fighters. He'd been sent on a rescue mission without proper equipment, including vital night vision goggles.
It's an insult to the integrity of the British Army, the regiment James was part of, and in particular the patrol commander. It's as simple as that.
At an inquest into James's death, the Oxford coroner Andrew Walker said his regiment were defeated not by terrorists but by a lack of basic equipment. He added it was unforgivable, inexcusable and a breach of trust. James's family want a full apology. They're also angry at criticisms of James's colleagues. Their MP is backing their case.
He has said sorry if my words have upset you. What he hasn't done is apologise that his words are incorrect. And that's really what the family is seeking, and indeed I am seeking on behalf of the family. Tony Phillipson is my constituent in St Albans, and he has accepted that James, and the coroner accepted, that James was let down badly by a lack of kit on the night, which contributed to his death.
The Ministry of Defence has said that proper equipment was available on the night James died, but hadn't been distributed properly. It's now improved supplies. Armed Forces Minister Bob Ainsworth has said he's sorry for any offence his criticisms of the regiment may have caused. James's family don't believe that's enough. They're now planning to meet the minister to ask for a full apology. Yvonne Hall, BBC London News, St Albans.
Now, how religious do you have to be to attend a religious school? Well, that's the question at the heart of a High Court challenge against the oldest Jewish school in London. A couple claim their son was racially discriminated against when he wasn't given a place there. Our special correspondent Kurt Barling has the story.
Like all faith schools, the Jewish Free School in Kenton, northwest London, sets strict criteria for admission. But some Jewish parents believe their children are being discriminated against for not being Jewish enough, just because the mother is a convert.
Someone could have a Jewish mother by birth, could be atheistic, as could be the mother. They could exist solely on a diet of bacon, and they could walk straight into JFS. Whereas someone like my daughter, who's been brought up in a Jewish home, we go to synagogue every week, we keep a kosher home, we can't get into JFS. And that is unfair.
Those who protect Jewish orthodoxy say it's for the chief rabbi alone to assert who's Jewish, with the assistance of a Beth Din or Jewish court. Absolutely not for the civil courts.
It doesn't just affect admissions policies in schools, it affects admission policies to a degree in synagogues, it affects membership within the Jewish faith, and perhaps above all else, it affects the status of a Jew when it comes to the context of marriage. Who is and who isn't a Jew?
Others see in this inflexibility a sign for them that British Judaism is losing its way.
When you're told that one child can go to a secondary school because its mother is a Jew of whom the chief rabbi approves, but another child in the same family cannot go. It is a cancerous, it's a malignant tumour eating at Anglo-Jewry. It's more than Israel, more than Zionism. I think it is the most explosive issue in facing Anglo-Jewry at the moment.
The parents seeking to secure a place at the oldest Jewish school in the capital await judgment in the High Court. Some feel their faith leaders have betrayed the roots of JFS.
The bottom line for me has to be this: if you believe in God, which I do, then he's a big boy and he's been around for a long time, and I'm sure he can distinguish between who is sincere and who isn't sincere.
Whatever the outcome of the court case, it's likely that this debate is going to rage on whether someone who's converted to Judaism is really Jewish. Kurt Barling, BBC London News.
The Metropolitan Police is planning to build a new £90 million firearms training centre in West London as the force's main site in Gravesend in Kent is now running at full capacity. More officers are having to be trained in the use of firearms following the London bombings and in the run-up to the 2012 Olympics. More than a third of children in London fail to get into their first choice of secondary school, according to a BBC survey. It compares to 15% in the rest of the country. The survey involved 107 local authorities. Now, people who live in Robin Hood Gardens in Poplar, East London, know the buildings are run down, the stairwells smell of urine and drug users are never far away. Yet some of Britain's best-known architects thinks it's one of the most important buildings that should be saved from demolition. Our reporter Mike Ramsden has spent the day there and spoken to a resident who can't wait to move out.
It's a nice one. Everything else is done up nice around here, apart from this one. It sticks like a sore thumb.
Mark Andre has spent years making his house in Robin Hood Gardens his home. Yet he's pleased it could soon be demolished.
All the drag heads, all the smack heads, you know, everything. Smashing cars, breaking in people's houses. You get all that around here.
Tower Hamlets and English partnerships say 80% of the people who live here would prefer demolition to refurbishment.
The design of this building is a reaction to the problems of tower blocks. The idea here was to build houses on top of houses, to give everybody a front door and create streets in the sky. But the idea never took off.
Yet another building site in the East End of London.
Robin Hood Gardens was meant to be a masterpiece, the bold creation of the darlings of 60s architecture, Peter and Alison Smithson.
An exemplar of a new mode of urban organisation.
But their creation had structural problems and a high crime rate. The project's failure damaged their reputation. But some of Britain's best architects now think their building should be saved.
I do believe that it's one of a handful of the best modern buildings in Britain. I mean, in my opinion, it's as good as some of the best Georgian terraces.
There's nothing intrinsically wrong with the architecture. It's poor management and poor maintenance by the local authority. With a little bit of tender, loving care, this building could be rendered into some of the best housing in the area.
Knocking down the mistakes built in the 60s and 70s has become a familiar process. Will the same now happen to Robin Hood Gardens? Mike Ramsden, BBC London News.
Well, Will Hurst is from Building Design magazine, which has led a campaign to save the buildings. Will, you've had 1,000 signatures in about 2 weeks. What is it about this building that architects love so much?
Well, I think it's inspired countless architects. I mean, we've been surprised by the response to our campaign, which has come from all over the world. I think the impression we're getting is that it's the kind of space, it's the balconies, which have fantastic views. It's a very well-built building, but it has been left to rot. It was a very sort of early example of this concept of streets in the sky, which was intended to give people great views. It's very close to Canary Wharf, and also allow a sort of social mixing going on, really.
Nevertheless, there are many people there, I don't think you'll deny, who do want to move out, who do think it just needs demolishing, really, which is what the council hope to do. Why are you standing in the way of development for them?
Well, we have been down there and we have spoken to residents, and we've met quite a few who actually do like it and have chosen to live there. It's true that there are serious problems with the building, we're not denying that, and it would need a serious amount of work to be done on it. But if the council spent the kind of money that they're going to spend knocking it down and building anew, then we think something pretty special could be done with it.
Have you thought about having a whip round amongst these architects who are willing to put their name to a bit of paper? Will they be willing to dig deep into their pockets?
Well, architects aren't the richest people, actually. I mean,
I
maybe
don't know. I don't know about that.
Some of them are. But I think if the council did decide to keep the building, you could get a really interesting architectural competition going. I think you'd get interest from all around the world, and architects would come up with some really imaginative solutions. So I think there could be a positive response to this.
And just briefly, would you live there?
I would, not now, perhaps, but when it gets refurbished, absolutely.
OK, well, thanks very much indeed for your time this evening. Now, still to come this evening.
Raising the flag for Banksy, this latest picture pops up in Islington. But what is it he's trying to say?
And the bells will be ringing all over East London in celebration of the best of what the area has to offer.
Now, are you one of those people who gives up your seat for pregnant women on the underground? Well, it seems too few of us are making way for expectant mums when we travel. In fact, a third of mums-to-be say they've never been offered a seat on the underground. So new signs have gone up to remind us to do the decent thing and give up our seats when others need them. Our transport correspondent, Tom Edwards, has more.
Be honest, how many of you have been so involved in reading the newspaper you haven't noticed someone else might need the seat more than you?
Could these new stickers be the way to try and change commuters' attitudes? Research shows that on average it takes 4 stops for a pregnant woman to be offered a seat. We took our researcher Karen, who's due in 3 months onto the Jubilee line, to see if that's true. On this journey she waited and waited and waited. In the end, we got off. But on the next trip she only had to wait a few seconds.
The first journey was definitely normal. People don't often get up. It's rare that somebody should get up and offer you their seat.
What about the second journey?
Second journey, it was very kind of the man to get up. It is surprising when somebody gets up for you. It's very nice.
So in the heat of rush hour, will behaviour change?
I'm usually very oblivious to it because everyone's got their head stuck in a paper in the morning and evening, so yeah, I'm probably not as good as I should be.
A long time ago when I was pregnant, no one going to see.
Some women are very bashful and quick forward, that being if they are pregnant, they should say.
If I see somebody who's elderly or I see somebody who is pregnant, most definitely I'm the first person up.
If you're travelling on the tube, it's hot, it's tiring, people are pushing and shoving and you've got a baby that you're trying to protect, you need to feel as though everybody's going to help you and look after you.
The scheme is now due to be rolled out across the tube network. For many mums-to-be, if it works, it won't come soon enough. Tom Edwards, BBC London News.
So will you be encouraged to give up your seats now that the signs have gone up, or do you think it won't make any difference at all? Also, have you travelled on the underground whilst pregnant, like Karen there? What was your experience like? Do email us with your thoughts to yourlondon@bbc.co.uk. Now, the elusive artist Banksy appears to have struck again, this time choosing the wall of a pharmacy in Islington to show off his work. The shop owner has said he's thrilled, and he should be. Some of Banksy's work sells for hundreds of thousands of pounds. Phil Lavelle is by the wall now. Phil, what's it like?
Yeah, evening. I said it's actually great. We've been here all day. At one point this afternoon, about 30 people were here taking photographs of Islington's latest attraction. Tonight, it's behind a plastic protective sheeting, perhaps a sign of just how vulnerable and valuable Banksy's work has become to the people of London. How many pharmacies could say they get this much attention? But now Banksy's been and left his mark with a message again, this time on Essex Road in Islington, drawing fans of all ages to come and take a look.
I think he's brilliant. I envy the man. I wish I could paint as good as that because I am into art, but I think his work's brilliant and I think it's very well done.
It's very much his style, I think. Yeah, it's one of his better ones.
All art's emotional, isn't it? Unless it's emotional, it's not art. And I think this has an emotional sort of reaction, doesn't it? People have reacted to it, they're already here reacting to it, so it's art.
This latest work appears to show 2 children pledging their allegiance to a Tesco carrier bag, a throwback to the images once seen in the Soviet Union, or a concern about the supermarket's power. It's a message that isn't lost on the pharmacy's owner, who discovered the work on his wall as he arrived on Monday morning.
I think we have something in common. I mean, I think he dislikes Tesco's or supermarkets as much as I do.
There's no doubt that Banksy's works attract attention. Some have sold for hundreds of thousands of pounds and have reportedly attracted the admiration of Hollywood celebrities. Little wonder then that within minutes of us arriving today, the Glaziers were here too, protecting the pharmacist's prized new possession.
Basically putting a 6mm protective plastic. It's unbreakable, so it can't be broke, but it can be vandalised. We just hopefully no vandalisers will touch it, obviously, but that's as much as we can do at the moment.
It's not yet known how much this piece could be worth, how much value it could have added to the shop. But for one chemist tucked away in Islington, it's exactly what the doctor ordered. Well, it's definitely attracted the crowds, I'll say that. Max Pollack is a director of an urban art collective, an expert in this kind of work. Max, can I just ask you, Banksy's work, he's always very mysterious, but he's got a unique style. Can we be sure this is one of his?
No, I don't think there's any way of being sure that this is his, but I don't think that matters. It could be any number of artists from London. The important thing here is that somebody's gone out their way to express themselves, and that should be considered by the public.
You talk about expressing themselves, they're making quite a powerful statement. Do you think it's obvious what he's trying to say?
Well, yeah, there's an obvious sense of irony, it's subjective, but I think really Banksy's the tip of an iceberg, a whole generation of artists that have very important messages and many different ways of expressing themselves, and we should really be looking at those artists as well as Banksy.
Well, like I say, the whole thing about him is he's mysterious. Banksy, you never know where he's going to strike. We'll just have to wait and see where we see the next picture. Back to you, Assad.
Phil, thanks very much for that. Now, the Wasps fullback Danny Cipriani has been dropped from the England Rugby Union team just 48 hours before he was due to make his first start against Scotland in the Six Nations. Cipriani was photographed coming out of a London nightclub after midnight, which the RFU regard as inappropriate behaviour. Charlton Chief Executive Peter Varney is to stand down at the end of the season, citing personal reasons. Varney served the club as CEO for over a decade and played a key part in helping the club return to the Valley in 1992. Brick Lane, Columbia Road and Hoxton are amongst the areas of East London often celebrated for their vibrancy and rich culture. Well, this year, East Festival, which launches today, hopes to take the celebrations across a wider area of the East End. It opens with a sound of 150 bell ringers. Well, our arts correspondent Brenda Amanis can tell us more now. Brenda.
Yes, Assad, how exciting. I'm in the bell tower of St. Vitus Church in the heart of the city, one of 21 historic churches in and around East London taking part in this bell relay. Now, we could hear earlier the sounds of St. Paul's, which has 12 bells. This one has 6. Over the next 2 hours, over 150 bell ringers are taking part in this relay, which is a part of the launch for the East London the East Festival all over East London. Earlier on, I went to Spitalfields to sample a little taste of this art, and what a great ding-a-linger I was. Campanology, the art of bell ringing, was on full display in Spitalfields this afternoon. For the first time, the public were invited to participate in playing the Charnborough Ring as part of the launch of the East Festival. How popular is it, this campanology?
It's more popular than you would think. I think there are probably 20,000-30,000 bell ringers across the country, perhaps 500 or 600 in London.
Have the people of East London been keen to come and grab the rope and have a go?
Yeah, we've taught a few people actually, and we can teach someone in 20 minutes how to ring a bell on these. Do you want to go?
Yes, you can.
You grab hold of this, you just hold that and pull it down and let it go. Pull it down and let it go.
What?
No, you didn't. You didn't let it go. Okay, well, that's lesson number 1. Okay.
Stratford Theatre Royal's production of The Harder They Come will be presented at the Barbican as one of 400 events taking place over the next 6 days. Clubs, galleries, shops and museums are all taking part.
It's basically to look at all the good things in East London and join them up. One of the things about the venues in East London is they tend to be more than just spaces for musical theatre. They have great galleries, they have fantastic cafes, they join up to all the things that you will find within East. So over these 6 days, people get the chance to do unexpected things, to see bell ringing relays running all around London, to go to amazing performances in unusual spaces.
Food, as expected, also plays a vital part in the celebrations.
We've tried to pull together a different mix of foods that represent East London, which has so many diverse cultures and so much great food here. So Taste East is really about giving people a taste of East London.
So, yummy food, film, photography, fashion, explosion of cultural activities in an area already renowned for it. Well, you can hear the sounds of Bow Bells and that of Stepney and Hackney and beyond until around 8 o'clock this afternoon. The East Festival runs until Tuesday, but until then, I'll leave you to the beautiful sound of the VDAS bell ringers.
OK, Brenda, thanks very much. I'm sure they'll be going on for quite some time now. Let's take a look at the weather forecast with Peter Cockcroft. Peter.
Thanks, Assad. Thankfully, the bells here at St Marylebone Parish Church are not ringing this evening. The weather is very similar to what we had yesterday evening for Spurs fans at White Hart Lane. Well, they're going to get the same weather as Chelsea fans had at Stamford Bridge. I think they'll be hoping for the same score as well. You'll be able to find out how well Spurs do on BBC London Radio, live commentary, and we've also got live commentary on the BBC London website. Now that's 7 Celsius, not very far away from our minimum temperatures tonight. We're going to keep this cloud blanket, but it will thicken up. So towards morning, that cloud is going to start to produce some rain. So we're going to have some wet weather for the early rush tomorrow. A westerly wind will start to blow that rain away from sort of mid-morning onwards. It'll clear out of the way, and then we can expect some brighter skies. The weekend's arrived a little bit earlier than I thought. But anyway, tomorrow temperatures around 10 Celsius, which means it's going to be colder than today, but some sunshine for the afternoon. Not sunny on Saturday, though. Some wet and windy weather for the start of the weekend. That clearing out of the way to give us sunshine and showers on Sunday. More sunshine than showers on Sunday. So the outlook for most of us is for a dry end to the weekend, although we have got that wet weather to start the weekend on Saturday. And remember, we've got wet weather to start with tomorrow. And the other thing to notice on the outlook, the numbers in the little yellow boxes. It'll be colder tomorrow, and temperatures will gradually slip away throughout the weekend, so it's going to get even colder, Assad.
Thanks very much for that, Pete. Now, you've been emailing us all day on the issue of giving up your seat to pregnant women on public transport. I've got some of those emails here. Helen Green from Hillingdon says, as the mother of 3 young children, I too have experienced not only struggling on the train whilst pregnant, but also while carrying a child in my arms, and wanted to know why Mayor Ken is not also pushing his message on our buses. Chris from London says, I'm sorry to say that being pregnant is not a disease nor a disability. It was their choice to put themselves in that condition. You're a very hard man. So why should paying customers give up their seat? Why stop at pregnancy? When I'm carrying 5 bags of shopping, why shouldn't I get a priority seat? Probably because everyone thinks like you, Chris. Lawrence D'Souza says it is common courtesy to offer your seat to the elderly and pregnant, and I certainly always do. Sonia says, when I was pregnant and commuted to work, I used my mouth and asked for a seat if no one had offered. It did embarrass people, but at least it made them take notice. Gareth Williams says, the last time I offered a seat on the tube to a lady, I got snapped at. She said, do you think I'm pregnant? She was, I guess, a little on the large side. Thanks very much for all those emails. We really do enjoy getting those. But now, let's take a look at the headlines. From next year, it will be compulsory for hundreds of thousands of workers to have ID cards. Within 10 years, we'll all have them. An inquiry has criticised GlaxoSmithKline, which produces the antidepressant Seroxat, because it delayed publicising evidence which showed that the drug was unsuitable for children. There will be no prosecutions. The IOC is being criticised for undermining London's hopes of delivering the greenest Olympic Games ever by demanding 3,000 cars to ferry around officials and sponsors. And the father of a soldier killed in Afghanistan is demanding an apology from the MOD after a coroner ruled he was not properly protected. Well, that's it for now. I'll be back with our next news at 10 tonight on BBC One. But for now, from everyone on the BBC London team, have a very good night. Bye-bye.
On the BBC now, Hollywood legend Kathleen Turner on The One Show here on BBC One. A mission to retrieve an alien device in Torchwood on BBC Two. And if you haven't made a date with the Archers recently, well, drop in tonight for some surprising events in Ambridge on Radio 4.
You witness a miracle, but not the one you expect.
the railroad barriers come down and every vehicle